I'm pretty sure this is going to be one of the hardest videos I ever record. I'm scared and I don't know how I'm going to do this, but today we have a brand new episode of the Versus series where we take your favorite artist and face them up against each other. Usually this is my favorite type of video to record. First of all, it gives me an excuse to go back to this wonderful discographies I enjoy so much, and also it sparks a lot of conversation in the comments section. So I'm more than happy to make this a weekly series comparing people like Bob Dylan to John Lennon, Paul McCartney to George Harrison, Elvis to Frank Sinatra, so on and so forth. But today is different because we have two of the most important, influential, and just greatest bands of all time, Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin, and I am terrified. This is two of my favorite bands ever. I love every single album they release, and I'm not even joking. Every single release by Black Sabbath with Ozzy Osbourne obviously is amazing, and the same thing can be said for Led Zeppelin. So I said to myself, if you're going to force yourself to do this, you might as well set some rules to make sure it's as precise and as professional as possible. So that is the reason why we're only going to be counting Black Sabbath's discography from 1970 all the way up to 1979 when Ozzy left for the first time. I think it's the most reasonable thing to do because we all know what happened to John Henry Bonham in 1980, you know, the drummer of the band, and after that Led Zeppelin didn't want it to continue. So I thought, why not do the same with Black Sabbath? Also, the only metrics that are going to be used for this video is my own personal opinion. If you're not familiar with the Versus series, we use 4 different categories to pick a winner at the very end of the video. Those 4 categories are discography, popularity, influence, and performance. If you disagree with me, if you think I've made a mistake or I said something that's not true, feel free to leave a comment down below. That's pretty much the reasons why I make this video. I love it when you guys interact with the channel. I look forward to it every time. So if you don't think the Black Sabbath wins or the Led Zeppelin wins, if you have your own theory on who's the best band, go ahead and leave it down below instead of getting angry and insulting me in the comments, because that's what a lot of y'all do. I have quite a few things to say about each band in each category, so I don't really want to make this intro too long. Let's go on with the first category, popularity. Popularity is probably going to be the easiest category out of the 4 because, I mean, it's pretty clear when you look at the record sales and when you look at the popularity polls that were made back in the 70s that Led Zeppelin was way bigger than Black Sabbath at the time. You know, nowadays it's different. You know, Ozzy Osbourne has become such a massive pop culture celebrity that Black Sabbath has enjoyed part of his popularity too. So if you consider a lot of the things that Ozzy Osbourne was doing in the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s with his reality show, with his live performances, and a lot of controversies he was involved in because of drugs and, you know, biting the head off of things, then I guess you could say that Black Sabbath was more popular. But if we're only counting the 70s, it's pretty clear that the 300 million albums that Led Zeppelin sold is way more than the 35 or 30 million Black Sabbath sold before Ozzy Osbourne left the band for the first time. Now, 35 million is a really good number. Still, I'm not saying that Black Sabbath was not popular. They were one of the most popular bands at the time, but Led Zeppelin was the first band to overthrow the Beatles in terms of popularity in 1969 when they released their first 2 albums, okay? And we're talking about the Beatles releasing albums like Abbey Road, the White Album, and Let It Be. So the fact that Led Zeppelin was even close to the Beatles at the time speaks for itself, and it's enough to give them the point, even though I know that a lot of you will disagree with me, because measuring the popularity of an artist back then when there was no internet, you know, you had no followers, you had to just measure it out of the record sales and how many people were talking about them at the time, and some polls that didn't really have the best sources. It's really complicated and annoying, and I know it's going to piss off a lot of people, so I'm just going to base it off of the record sales, and Led Zeppelin has 300 millions, Black Sabbath only has 35, so Led Zeppelin takes the point. Now let's go with influence, and this is going to be really complicated. I have no idea how to approach this because both Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath are 2 of the most influential bands of all time. Led Zeppelin introduced a heavier version of rock that shocked the music world and that reignited the flame of rock music and inspired people like Queen, Nirvana, Rush, the Ramones, Pearl Jam, Van Halen in the 80s, Guns N' Roses. I mean, listing all the artists that have Led Zeppelin as a major influence is almost impossible because the list is so big. But on the other hand, we have Black Sabbath, literally the grandfathers of metal music. They invented the genre. The first metal album ever made is their self-titled record released in 1970, and we all know how many great artists, albums, songs came out of the metal genre and all the different versions of it. Black metal, doom metal, death metal, heavy metal music, and Black Sabbath not only inspired those genres but also participated. Ozzy Osbourne himself, when you look at the 80s, participated in all all the different like subgenres that metal music spawned. I already know that there's going to be people in my comments section saying, well, Led Zeppelin inspired Black Sabbath, so because of that, Led Zeppelin should take the point in this category. But personally for me, I don't really think that Led Zeppelin was like a major inspiration for the Black Sabbath band. They inspired each other once they were going in the 70s. You know, in the early 70s, obviously they were looking at each other's work and trying to get what they could from it. But when you compare the rawness and the darkness in the self-titled debut by Black Sabbath, is very different from what Led Zeppelin was doing in 1970, in Led Zeppelin 3, and in albums like Led Zeppelin 4 in 1971. You know, there's almost like night and day comparison. There's nothing too similar about it other than the fact that they're both heavier versions of rock music. Black Sabbath was more fast-paced. The lyrics showed more occultism and a lot of dark taboo themes. If anything, Black Sabbath felt more unique, like they were inventing a new type of music. Led Zeppelin, on the other hand, it almost felt like they took something that already existed before in the form of Helter Skelter and Your Blues by the Beatles, or Tommy by The Who, or Jimi Hendrix, you know, all three of his albums. Raised the volume and added a little bit more distortion, and that's pretty much it. But because of how good they were at playing the instruments, in the case of Robert Plant using his voice, people saw them as something new and unique, when in reality they weren't, or at least not as much as Black Sabbath, which again, you're not going to find anything that's even close to Master of Reality or Paranoid before Black Sabbath. It's just impossible to find because it doesn't exist. And for that reason, I kind of have to give the point to Black Sabbath. Before them there was nothing, and after them you have metal music and all the subgenres that came out of it, so Black Sabbath takes the point. Now let's go with performance. This is going to be significantly easier, because even though I love Black Sabbath and its performers, you know, Geezer Butler, one of the best bass players of all time, Aomi is one of the most important composers of the metal music genre, Bill Ward is a great contender to be the greatest drummer of all time, and Ozzy Osbourne, I mean, again, an amazing vocalist, an amazing performer. What can you say about Ozzy that hasn't been already said before? But on the other hand, we have Led Zeppelin, and quite simply, John Paul Jones is the greatest bassist of all time. I mean, his bass lines were ridiculous. His ability to keep up with the groove of the band was immaculate. Jimmy Page is one of the greatest guitarists of all time. His solos and his guitar riffs are unmatched. His ability to compose music was also incredible. You know, he was one of the best and most sought after studio musicians in the 60s. And obviously, John Henry Bonham is the greatest drummer of all time. Bill Ward is a great contender, as I said before, but he's not the greatest. The greatest is John Henry Bonham. No one played the drums like him. His ability to keep up with the energy, the violence, and the heaviness of Led Zeppelin was incredible. There were some live performances where his drum solos reached 20 minutes in length. That is ridiculous. And then, of course, you have the golden god, you know, Robert Plant in the vocals, one of the greatest, if not the greatest performer ever. I mean, his vocals were incredibly groovy. They were super epic, you know, when they needed to be, and they could also be tender, as shown in songs like Going to California, for example. He was just a great singer, a great frontman too. You know, he was able to stand in the middle of the stage and not really move around all that much, and still fill the stage with his charisma and his personality. We're talking about the greatest performers of all time when we talk about Led Zeppelin, and that is the reason why I have to give the point to Led Zeppelin in this category. I mean, again, Black Sabbath members were amazing performers, and if this was any other band other than Led Zeppelin, I would probably give the point to them, but no other band in the history of music can take the point away from Led Zeppelin in terms of performance. They were the greatest performers of all time. Their live shows are amazing. Their live albums are ridiculously good, almost better than the studio performance, you know, so that is the reason why they take the point, no matter the band. You know, if this wasn't Black Sabbath, but the Beatles, but Rush, but the Ramones, no matter the band we're talking about, Led Zeppelin takes a point. Now let's go with discography, the most important category in this entire video. I say it all the time. For me, if you win discography, you win the entire thing, even if you're losing in terms of points, you know, because when people talk about you, the actual music is the thing that comes to mind, you know. So in terms of discography, which is better, Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin? Well, it's really hard to decide, you know, almost impossible, because in the case of Led Zeppelin, we have Led Zeppelin 1, 2, 3, and 4, some of the best-selling albums of all time, some of the most influential pieces of music ever. And in the case of Led Zeppelin 4, one of the greatest albums ever made. And then you have Houses of the Holy and Physical Graffiti. Again, incredible pieces of music. Houses of the Holy being my favorite album from the entire discography of the band. And then you have Presence and In Through the Outdoor. Again, wonderful albums, not exactly at the same level of quality as the ones I said just a moment ago, but still amazing pieces of music from the 70s. But on the other hand, we have Black Sabbath, and we don't really have a shortage of great albums. The 1970 self-titled release, Paranoid, Master of Reality, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Volume 4, and Sabotage. I mean, some of the greatest pieces of music ever made, and I know that I've been saying that a lot in this video, but we're talking about two of the most legendary bands, and honestly, if we base it off of my opinion alone, I'd have to give the point to Black Sabbath because, again, like the albums I just mentioned are incredible. You know, an otherworldly experience. You're not the same before and after you listen to this album, especially if you pay attention to the lyrics, the riffs, the production, the drumming, the bass lines, and the incredible, almost alien-like performances by Ozzy Osbourne. You know, when you listen to him sing, you understand why people used to call him the Prince of Darkness. You know, it's almost hard to believe that he was a real person at the time of recording this album, because when you look at his 80s stuff, he's a lot more normal, or at least, you know, you feel like he is pretending to be the same person he was in the 70s. They're great albums, those records from his solo career are great, but they're not as legendary as this one's, because here you feel like all his attitudes, all his antics are genuine. You do feel like it's pure darkness behind that voice, and that is the reason why I have to give the point to Black Sabbath in this one. You know, Led Zeppelin, again, some of the most incredible albums, and in terms of popularity, those albums win. You're more likely to find someone that has heard Led Zeppelin 4 than Paranoid. You know, that's just a fact. But in my personal opinion, the level of quality that these albums from Black Sabbath enjoys are beyond human comprehension. Then you also have the fact that Ozzy Osbourne released more albums with Black Sabbath, like 13 for example being the most recent one, I think. And then of course you have Technical Ecstasy in 1976 and Never Say Die in 1978. Albums are not necessarily bad, but they are a bit disappointing. I don't usually listen to those records. I don't really have a lot to say about them because I listened to the entirety of the Black Sabbath discography at once. You know, I listened to the entire thing in one run, and obviously these albums were incredibly disappointing comparing them to the quality of the ones that came before them, you know, so that's the reason why I don't really mention them all that much, but I don't need to. With the 5 albums I mentioned before, it's more than enough to give Black Sabbath the point, because even though the Led Zeppelin self-titled releases, Houses of the Holy and Physical Graffiti are among the greatest pieces of music ever, and I'm pretty sure that if you go to a lot of, you know, the best rock albums of all time lists, you're gonna find each and every single one of them. Even Presence is gonna be there somewhere, but I'm basing it off of my personal opinion, and I'm pretty sure that you're also gonna find a lot of Black Sabbath releases in those type of lists, you know. So for me, Black Sabbath takes a point. All right, so as you can see in the scoreboard, it's a draw. They both have 2 points, which means it's up for me to decide which band is going to be the winner of this video, and I'm gonna say it straight up, Black Sabbath is going to take the win home. I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me. A lot of people are even going to say that this video makes no sense because comparing Black Sabbath to Led Zeppelin is a waste of time. They were both very different to each other. They both release amazing pieces of music, so we should enjoy both of them and that's it. But the reason why I make this video is because it's really interesting to look at the story of the band, to look at the releases, to look at the sales, to look at the influence, to look at all the factors that kind of build up your legacy and decide a winner based on your own personal opinions, which is exactly what I want you to do. I want you to look at the releases from Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and decide who's the winner in the comment section, and I can give you my opinion on your opinion. We can have a conversation about it in the comment section. There's no need to be angry. This is just a fun little exercise of free speech. You may even change my mind, because even though I'm giving the point to Black Sabbath on this video, I have to say that the only reason why I'm doing that is because they're more unique. Before Black Sabbath, there was nothing like them in the music industry. Instead, Led Zeppelin took a lot of influence from many of the bands that were active in 1969 and 1968 to build their own sound. But I have to admit that in terms of quality, both bands are pretty much leveled. You know, there's things that Led Zeppelin satisfies that Black Sabbath cannot satisfy, and the other way around as well. So even though I have Black Sabbath as the winner of this video, for me, both bands are amazing, and you should enjoy both bands because you're looking at 2 of the greatest musical acts of all time. But with that being said, I truly hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other videos that I upload. If you want me to talk about any other topic related to music, if you want me to check out a song, album, or artist, leave it down below as well, and I'll make sure to read it and feel free to request as soon as I can. Once again, I hope that you guys enjoyed, and I hope that I can see you soon with a new video. But until then, bye.